Clint Eastwood learned almost everything. He learned some things from Sergio Leone when he did the spaghetti westerns in Italy. But he learned most of what he knows as a director today, and he will tell you this, from Don Siegel. So Don was Clint's mentor. And Bob shot the movie. Bruce was the camera operator. Don liked Bruce. So he decided to put Bruce and Eastwood together. And they went on to do 16 films together, with Bruce as his director of photography. And his first director of photography job was a film called Beguiled that actually Don directed and Clint starred in. And it was a story of a Confederate soldier at the end of the Civil War who gets found, he gets hurt, he's wounded, and these girls find him and they take him back to this boarding school in Mississippi that they live in, and they nurse him to health while hiding him from General Sherman's soldiers who are marching through the South on their way to burn Atlanta. And it's very dark, a lot of it, and there's one scene in it where it's just a candle, and it's this one girl and Clint. And Bruce sets it up, and they keep going, no, too much light. Bruce sets it up again, turns the lights down, puts scrims over the lights. They do the setup 4 or 5 times. Every time, too much light. So finally, Bruce gets pissed. So he shuts down all the lights. He takes the candle, he puts it in the middle of the table, he lights it, and he goes, that's it, that's the way we're going to shoot it. Now, if you know anything about photography, particularly cinema photography, that's 1 foot candle of light. That's the smallest amount of light you can use and get an image. Anything less than that, it ain't going to show. And so Bruce took the fastest lenses he had, which means they opened up the most, and he shot that shot. And that shot became famous. And he gave my cousin Bruce his nickname, which was the Prince of Darkness. That's what they called him. And of course he did, like I said, he did all these movies with another 15 movies with Eastwood. And Eastwood loves the dark. If you watch Eastwood's movies, he does a lot of interiors in very dark places. And so Bruce was the guy who helped him develop that visual style. So now Bruce is in the game. But let's go back to Bob. And let's go to The Sting. He's nominated for Academy Award for The Sting. Why he didn't win for The Sting. He was nominated for The Graduate too and didn't win. Why he didn't win for those 2 movies to this day, I do not know. I mean, they were so groundbreaking and so well done. The Sting, he shot a sepia tone film. And sepia tone was a stage that still photography went through in the 19th century. And it resulted in these very kind of brownish toned pictures that you see, these old-fashioned pictures. And Bob took that style and applied it to this subject matter with Paul Newman and Robert Redford. Film won multiple Academy Awards. And for the next 10 years, even longer than 10 years, almost every famous director did sepia tone film. You know, Bob Altman, Sam Peckinpah, every one of them did. Warren Beatty, every one of them did a sepia tone film. Started right there. Great Wall of Pepper is interesting because it's about the early days of flying, and there's some incredible aerial photography in it. Star is Born, just a quick story. Barbra Streisand, Chris Christopherson, very famous movie at the time. Remake of a very famous movie. I think it was the second remake of it. I think that movie's been remade, what, 4 times now, man?
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting story. It was Barbra Streisand and Chris Christopherson, but who she wanted to play the lead in it and couldn't get was Elvis Presley. And Elvis' career was controlled, his movie career, his whole career was controlled by a guy named Colonel Tom. Last Picture Show, that Bear's talking about. The Last Picture Show, again, another film shot in that very modern style. They chose to shoot it in black and white. They chose to shoot it in very saturated black and white. So there was a lot of contrast all the way through the film between the black tones and the white tones in the film. It's a story, it's a coming-of-age story in a small Texas town, and it's mirrored by the closing or the end of this last theater that exists in this small Texas town. Peter Bogdanovich was the director. He was a New York film critic who, much like the Frenchman 10 years before him, wanted to be a director. This was his first directorial job, and he hired Bob. Bob took the job, meets with the producer, meets with the production designer, all these people. He never meets Bogdanovich. Bogdanovich doesn't show. They get to the point where they should be doing rehearsals and tech rehearsals. Bogdanovich has this woman, Polly Pratt, who was his production designer, doing the technical rehearsals and the actors' rehearsals, and he's not there. And this is highly unusual, because usually that director wants to be in there, particularly with the cinematographer, and tell them, this is the visual style I want, this is how this is, da-da-da-da-da-da, and they go through the director's storyboard, and they set out the visual style for every shot. Finally, the week before they're supposed to start shooting, Bob gets a phone call, and it's Bogdanovich, and Bogdanovich says, hey, I'm in town, why don't you come and have lunch with me? Bob says, okay, fine. He goes down to Musso Frank's in Hollywood and has lunch, and he gets there, and there's this big carton sitting on the table, and gift wrapped. And he sits down, they order a drink, they start to talk. Bogdanovich grabs his carton, very dramatically. Bogdanovich's kind of a dramatic guy, you know, and he hands it to Bob, and he says, this is for you. And Bob is like, you know, very taciturn individual, and you know, this is not the way that he rolls. And so Bob takes it, and he opens it, and he pulls out this beautiful oak lens case. And he puts it on the table, and Bogdanovich says, open it. Bob opens it, and it's a wide-angle Panavision lens. And he says, Bogdanovich says to him, shoot it like Greg Toland shot Citizen Man. And Bob takes a minute, thinks about it, and says, well, too bad Greg Toland's dead, you could have gotten him. And he indeed did kind of shoot it that way. But when Bob tells this story, he always adds this on the end. Those were the last camera directions he got from Peter Bogdanovich. Bogdanovich spent all of his time with the actors and literally let Bob set up, light, and shoot every shot without any input whatsoever. He was a first-time director. He didn't take the time to learn what Bob was doing, but he had the trust to just let him do it, and knew it looked great, and it did look great. And the film won a lot of awards, And people were very surprised by this show so late in Bob's career. So, The Graduate, Ben-Hur, The Sting, those are there for a reason. The Last Picture Show's there for a reason, and Bob's name at number 4 in that list is there for a reason. Now, here's the amazing thing about that list. Billy Bitzer was number 1. The number 2 guy was Jimmy Wong Howe, who I told you went from the silence to the 70s. Jimmy Wong Howe started out in the business working for Billy Bitzer. Number 3 guy was Greg Toland, who did Citizen Kane. He set the visual style for film noir. Greg Toland started out in the business working for Jimmy Wong Howe. Number 4 guy on that list was Bob Surtees. And Bob started out in the business under Joe Ruttenberg, but spent a number of years working for Greg Toland. So the number 1, 2, 3, and 4 guys on that list, picked by living cinematographers about 5 years ago, all came from the exact same lineage. Now, unfortunately, Bob was long gone by then. Had I known that, back when I was in school and back when I was starting out in the business, I would have wanted to know, what the hell did they say to each other? What was the secret? Guys, the 4 of them all are on the same list of the greatest American cinematographers of all time. Right at the top. So I don't know what it was, but whatever it was, it certainly worked. And my cousin Bruce went on to, yeah, you're going to bring Bruce up here? You don't have a picture of Bruce, I bet.
I don't think he did, though.
He was pretty camera shy. MGM's #1 cameraman during most of the years that Bob was there, Moore, Hal Moore. His son has Hal Moore's last name as his middle name, Bruce Moore, Powell Surtees. Powell's my aunt's maiden name. Here's the pictures they have chosen to put up as Bruce's most famous pictures. Now I'll tell you the good ones. The most famous ones and the good ones are not always the same. First thing I want to point out. Now they only have, what, 6 credits there, going from assistant cameraman to camera operator. And they only have from 65 to 71. What a difference. Now actually Bruce had more credits than that. He had about a dozen credits. And they don't have Newton and Bounty and the older stuff. IMDb, if you ever go to use it, always double check it because the further back it goes, the less inclusive it is. And it often makes mistakes. I saw something here today that I'm going to talk more about Bob. And so, like I said, Bruce, modern guy, all the modern techniques, fast shooter, Prince of Darkness. Eastwood liked to shoot fast. He had learned that from Sergio Leone in Italy. Down and dirty is the Eastwood way. You set it up, you shoot it. You don't need to do a lot of takes. You know, you're a professional, you're supposed to get it in the first take. You know, and that's the way Clint works. The Beguiled was the film that had the candlelight sequence. Great sequence to go find and look at because it's amazing. Nobody could believe they did it that way at the time they did it. Play Misty for me was a huge, huge Eastwood hit early in his career. His first huge American hit. Dirty Harry introduces us to one of the fabled Eastwood characters, Harry Callahan, police detective from San Francisco PD. A completely different type of detective movie than they had a few in the film noir area in the 50s. These film noir films were almost like B movies, you know, they were little movies, low budget. They'd had a few guys like this in those. And that's where Eastwood got the idea for it. And, but it was a modern, kick-ass, mean SOB of a cop. I mean, there was nothing nice about Harry Callahan. He said very few things, and he'd rather shoot you than arrest you because if he arrested you, there was going to be a lot of paperwork. And but if you go back and you see this movie that started the Dirty Harry, I think there have been 5 of them, the Dirty Harry sequence of films for Eastwood, you'll notice that this just happened to me about 2 years ago. I went to see a restored print of this movie, and I was with 3 friends of mine, all 3 of whom are very well-known directors. Taylor Hackford, who's President of Directors Guild, was one of them, and Michael Mann was one of them. And we sat down and we saw this, and we walked out, and the first thing we talked about was, Jesus, I didn't realize how much the visual style of that movie set up this character, and how much it set up the story. The visual stuff in that film is amazing, and because most of it's in nightclubs, where Lenny Bruce is on stage and in the spotlight, or back rooms of nightclubs or bars. So it's a phenomenal movie. So Bruce was a good DP. He was very, very good. He did some significant things. Bob was an all-star's all-star. He was one of the greatest directors of photography ever.